It appears as though the Democrat hierarchy pushed him out, threatened him to pull the 25th Amendment on him and physically remove him from the White House. Very, very underreported story is going on beneath the surface here over the events of the last several days when that letter was put out by Joe Biden saying that he was removing himself from contention for the Democratic nomination at the convention next month. It appears as though, according to reports from the New York Post, and it's a very credible report, and we're going to go through it in detail, it appears as though the Democrat hierarchy pushed him out, threatened him to pull the 25th Amendment on him and physically remove him from the White House if he did not knuckle under to their demands. This would all make sense, actually. That inexplicable announcement on Sunday, if in fact it was voluntary from Joe Biden, it came just days after he publicly said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing what these elites say. I'm the one who can beat Trump. I got 14 million votes, and they're not pushing me out. And then without any further discussion, boom, he's gone. How did all this transpire? Well, let's turn to the New York Post together, shall we? The headline: top Dems threaten to forcibly remove Biden from office unless he dropped out, set him up to fail at Trump debate, according to sources. Isabel Vincent reporting on this, and the story hit late yesterday afternoon. Now, let's go through this together. Operatives at the very highest levels of the Democratic Party, and let's just be clear what that means. The very highest levels means that you can't get higher. So that means the chairman of the DNC, it means the majority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, it means Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries in the House, it means Barack Obama, it means Kamala Harris. That's the highest levels of power at the Democratic Party. Operatives at the very highest levels of the Democratic Party threatened Joe Biden with forcibly removing him from office unless he stepped down, sources told the Post. The well-orchestrated palace coup to stop the faltering president seeking re-election has been in place for weeks, but stubborn Biden fought against it every step of the way, a source close to the Biden family told the Post Monday. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, it's anonymous sources, people talking off the record, and, these are the kind of stories that they try to, destroy Trump with, and unless people go on the record, we're not going to take the story. Well, first of all, who would go on the record with a story like this, number one? And number two, of all the publications out there that have news reports, investigative pieces like this, that are sourced from anonymous sources, wouldn't you, on the face of it, lend some credibility to the New York Post? The New York Post, who had the Hunter Biden story, who stood by their reporting on the Hunter Biden story, who anonymous sources have been right every step of the way. This isn't like the Washington Post or the New York Times or CNN, where their anonymous sources are clearly just using those publications as political weapons against conservatives and Republicans. No, this is the New York Post, who is actually engaged in real life journalism, who people like CNN and Washington Post and New York Times hate, which basically, frankly, to me, lends more credibility to this investigation. Also, what's in it for anybody to leak this information to the New York Post? I mean, what are they gaining from this? It doesn't help Kamala Harris, certainly. It doesn't. I mean, that also, who benefits from this? This doesn't help Trump, really. It makes Biden look like a sympathetic figure. It makes the top Democrats look hypocritical, but it's not going to keep anybody from voting for them. So that makes me believe this story, because nobody benefits from this other than you and I getting the truth. All right, let's get back to it. The insider also made clear the anger, paranoia, and frustration Biden displayed as the party elites circled around him and piled on the pressure. And well, we saw that firsthand, didn't we? Part of the elaborate strategy to remove Biden from the race, as he announced in a shock letter posted on X Sunday, was allowing him to debate Republican candidate Donald Trump last month on live TV in Atlanta. During the car crash 90-minute debate, Biden appeared confused, slack-jawed, and at one point he froze up, with his shocking performance turning the tide against him. Listen, we speculated about this when Biden inexplicably made this debate challenge to Trump months ago. Why on earth would they say, let's debate in June? Presidential debates are never held in June. Why would they do it before the convention, before the nominating process? And if you remember watching this program, I told you why. Because they were trying to prove before the convention that they were just fine. They were okay. And the party elders agreed to this so that if it was a disaster, they'd be able to maneuver. The only thing that screwed up their plan was that he refused to go. They thought he'd be reasonable, but they didn't count on Jill and Hunter taking command. We'll get to that in just a moment. But this is the only logical explanation. It is a complete and total malpractice politically to agree to a debate, especially when you're the incumbent. Why would you agree to a debate this early on in the process? You wait. The last election in 2020, they waited until early voting was already going on. And they even canceled one of the debates, remember? So this makes sense. See, listen, all these anonymous sourced articles that we live with, sadly, in Washington, D.C., here in this decrepit town, you should take them with a grain of salt. And sadly, it's up to you to pick and choose which ones make sense to you and which ones you think are true. To me, one of my rules of thumbs is that if it fits facts on the ground and actually makes logical sense, then you should take the story seriously. And this makes logical sense. It's the only explanation. Why in the hell else would they do a debate this early? It was part of the setup. All right. More on this article. Scrolling. That debate was a setup to convince Democrats that he couldn't run for president, the source said on Monday. As calls for him to bow out mounted, Biden insisted he could continue, but party bigwigs threatened to invoke the 25th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. The amendment allows for the vice president and members of the cabinet to declare he is unfit to serve and force him to step down, the source added. The White House and representatives from the Democratic National Committee did not immediately respond to the Post request for comment. More. Although Biden immediately endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate for president, the source said Democratic delegates will be strongly encouraged to instead back Arizona Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly for president at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago in August. Now, one update here, because this was printed around 3:30 yesterday afternoon. Since then, in the evening, the Kamala Harris people declared that they have, in fact, secured enough delegates to win on the first ballot in Chicago, which is, well, we'll see it when we believe it, or we'll believe it when we see it. But that's what they're claiming. So they're trying to preempt an attempt like this from someone else, which is actually kind of fascinating if you think about it, because everybody after the fact said, well, we're going to have a very open process, a very open process. We'll have an open process where if anyone else wants to challenge, they can certainly put their hat into the wing. We're going to have an open process to determine who the nominee is. And here we are, the announcement is Sunday. And by Monday evening, Kamala Harris says, that's it, it's over. The open process is complete. That was it. That's our 24-hour open process, and now it's locked down. And a woman who has never actually gotten a vote of any Democrat nationwide to be on a national ticket is going to be the nominee for president. A woman who was a senator from California for 4 years? And let's not make a mistake here. Kamala Harris is very much the embodiment of California Democrat policies and everything that goes along with it. She's now your nominee for the presidency without ever actually having to do anything to get it. I mean, other than whatever it is she did to get ahead in politics, but we'll get to that a little later. Okay, so that's your open process. Now, what's interesting is Mark Kelly is being rumored as on the short list for running mate. So maybe that's the trade-off that was made. Let's continue with the article. Some holdouts have still yet to endorse Harris as Biden's successor, despite less than a month until the convention, only 4 months until Election Day. Most notable among them is former President Barack Obama. By the way, I don't think that's very notable. This is typical Obama. He keeps his fingerprints off everything. He doesn't have to publicly endorse Kamala Harris, especially in a process like this, because his public endorsement is meant to persuade the people. Well, the people are irrelevant in this entire process. He doesn't have to publicly endorse Kamala Harris. All he has to do is make one or two phone calls to well placed Democrat leaders who communicate with the delegates, and it's over. So I don't find that notable. It's typical Barack Obama. Yeah, I had no idea that you couldn't keep your doctor if you like your doctor. That's Obama. Quote, "We will be navigating uncharted waters in the days ahead," Obama said on Sunday. Following the debate, the first son, Hunter Biden, suddenly became more involved in his father's day to day business and insisted upon attending every official and unofficial meeting, the source said. Hunter felt he, Joe Biden, was being set up, and he was very concerned about his father, the source said. These people, these officials, were not on Joe's side. See, that's what they weren't counting on. They weren't counting on the audacious nature of the Biden family. The last thing they expected was Hunter getting himself involved. Hunter, the whoremongering crack addict who just got convicted on felony gun charges, then actually being so shameless that he would inject himself into White House staff meetings to make sure that his dad is protected. But never underestimate the ability of a member of the Biden family to be brazenly corrupt and shameless. So that's a big mistake these party operatives made. Biden's own staff did not have any forewarning about the bombshell decision to pull out of the race, which was known since at least Tuesday of last week, the source said. Many were also shocked by the letter posted to Biden's X account itself, as it was typed on his private letterhead rather than the White House notepaper and signed electronically, the source said. Everyone was totally shocked, the source said. It was pretty telling that Jill Biden tweeted a heart emoji and nothing else. Democratic Party insiders have also known for at least 2 years how Biden was in decline, said the source. When I saw him a couple of years ago, it was frightening, said the source. He was just repeating slogans and had no idea who I was. So there it is from the New York Post. Have you heard anyone else reporting on this? I mean, this seems like a pretty big deal. It seems like it's well sourced. It seems like it's very well laid out and fact checked and researched, and it's just sitting there. It's just sitting there on the New York Post gathering dust. I think it's noteworthy.